joined by Jules Strongbow.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Former WWF Tag Team Champion from back in the day. Big fan growing up. I was watching WWF back, well, it was WWF and then WWF. And I remember when I started watching wrestling, I believe around 83, you and Jay were pretty much on top of the tag team world back then. So,
yeah, we were.
Before I get into all the WWF stuff, I want to talk about your early career and how you got started in the business. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the business?
Well, I was like, at the time, like a lot of people, I was a big fan growing up. I used to watch wrestling on Saturday nights coming from the International Amphitheater in Chicago. Seeing guys like Vern Gagne and Pat O'Connor and the Kalmakoff brothers and Johnny Case and Macho Man's dad, Angelo Poffo, and guys like Big Moose Cholak and Sailor Art Thomas and Sweet Daddy Siki, those guys. And when I was growing up, that was the big thing for me on Saturday night, was to stay up late and watch wrestling. And I went in the service after I graduated from high school, and then I settled in Milwaukee and started going to the matches in Milwaukee. It was AWA at that time then. And I got to know the promoter at the time, who was Dennis Hilgard, working with Wally Carbo and Vern Gagne out of Minneapolis. And the more I watched, the more I kept thinking, I can do this. So then it got to a point with Dennis where Dennis would have me run the guys to the airport or pick them up or whatever. And there was one of the wrestlers, his name was Stan Big K. And I was joking with him that night, and I says, "Didn't have too good a match tonight, did you?" And he says, "No, and if you think you can do any better, then get your ass in there and do it." So I said, So I started writing letters, to different people who were training guys. Billy Red Lyons, Vern Gagne, a couple of guys out of Chicago. And I kept getting the same thing, money, this much money. And at the time, I didn't have that kind of money, because the money they were asking for training was a lot of money at the time. It's still a lot of money to a lot of people. And then there were some guys who were going to run a little independent show in Racine, Wisconsin. They called me. This is after a year and a half of trying to find somebody who would listen to me, that I wanted to be a wrestler. And they says, "You still want to be a wrestler?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was almost on the verge of just giving up trying, a year and a half. And it seemed like the harder I tried, the harder they didn't want me to get in the business. And he said, "Okay, we're going to book you on a show." And I said, "I've got no training." He says, "Don't worry about it. We'll get you some training. We'll see what kind of potential you got, and we'll go from there." So my first match was in Racine, Wisconsin, July 20th, 1970. And the next day they were having wrestling matches at the Eagles Club in Milwaukee. I lived a half a block from the Eagles Club in Milwaukee. And one of the guys says, "Bring your gear, show up. If somebody doesn't show up, I'll talk to the promoter and we'll see if we can get you on that show." Well, the guy that didn't show up and allowed me to wrestle that day was a young guy by the name of Paul Pershman, known more today as Playboy Buddy Rose. And he didn't show up for whatever reason. He didn't show up for those matches. So one of the guys says, "Hey, there's this Indian kid over here. It's pretty good." So there were guys doing TV out of Milwaukee. Amado Rodriguez, Cesar Paban, a guy named Carlos, and I can't remember his last name. Anyway, Amado come to me and after the match was over, and he says, "Be at the gym 10 o'clock Monday morning. We're going to start training you." And I said, what is this going to cost me? He says, you work with us on shows that we promote, we'll train you, we'll call it a trade-off. So that's how it started. Then when I first went up to do TV, my first day in the dressing room, I walked in and you know, being the rookie I was, and at that time, there was a, I don't know what you call it, a way of doing things. You know, rookies did things a certain way, and until you were accepted as one of the boys. And my first match was against Red Bastine, 2 out of 3 falls on TV.
Right.
I was never so worn out in my life, but after the match, Vern come and he says, glad to see you didn't give up. And when I first walked in the dressing room and introduced myself to Vern, he goes, thought I told you to not get into the business. I says, yeah, you did. He said, okay. He says, we'll see what you're made out of, see what kind of potential. So that started the TV thing, you know, and for 9 years, and as I grew in the business, you know, and got better and better, I got more bookings, and finally in 1979, I was at a point where I felt that I needed to prove something to myself, that I could go somewhere in this business.
Who would you consider one of your mentors when you got into the business? Who was the one guy that took you under their wing?
The guy that took me under his wing primarily was Nick Bockwinkel.
Okay.
But Nick Bockwinkel also, at the time, we had guys like Ray Stevens, Larry Henning, Vern Gagne, Billy Robinson, Baron von Raschke, The Crusher. And these guys all took turns, would help me along. You know, they'd give me little pieces of advice and learning tools and stuff. But the one who primarily spent the most time with me, and to this day I consider probably the greatest wrestler in the business to this point in time, to today, is Nick Bockwinkel. I would say without a doubt that the bulk of my career is owed to Nick Bockwinkel.
What are some of your early memories of Nick?
Very, very determined. An absolute dream as a teacher. Nick would come out and watch every match I ever wrestled. And then when I got back to the dressing room, he'd go, and you could hear it in the dressing room. School time, he'd go over each and every match, what I did, what I shouldn't have done, what I might want to try, how I might want to do something else, how you might want to do this, don't do this. It was a learning process, and he was the teacher. And I was a very, very willing student, and to this day I consider myself to be one of the luckiest people in this business to have those men, primarily Nick, but Ray Stevens. Pat Patterson was there too.
Well, I'm going to ask you about all these guys coming up, definitely. I guess for you, what was harder for you? Was to learn the psychology of the business or learning how to bump?
The psychology of the business was rough. You know, it's psychology in any form, whatever you're doing, is rough. Psychology is very intense. The mechanics of the business came to me very easy. I don't know why or what happened in my life, but maybe it was the backyard wrestling on the mattress with my little brother. After the wrestling matches were over, on Sunday afternoon, we'd be out in the backyard. But the mechanics of the business came very easy. The psychology, that took a little bit of time, but I actually enjoyed doing it. It was a mental game, and for people who've been around me a long time, they know that psychology is one of my pet studies.
Did you ever want to quit? Like, did any of the veterans ever try to stretch you and get you to quit the business?
No. It to me it was a learning process, and I paid attention to what I was told. I learned what I was supposed to do, and like I said, Nick and Ray and Vern and the rest of the guys all took very good care of me. And to this day, I still don't know for what reason. Evidently, they seen something that was there.
Before I talk about AWA in great detail, did you ever work for Georgia Championship Wrestling at all for a little bit?
I went down to I was in the Army Reserves at that time, and
Right.
I went down to Georgia Championship Wrestling for one weekend to do TV because I was at Fort Gordon, Georgia,
Right.
for Army Reserve summer camp, and I went to do TV in Atlanta, and then they asked me. Ole Anderson asked me. He says, "Can you go to do?" What's the other town that they used to run down there? They used to do TV for Fred Miller.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, it was, I'd done 3 shots down there for him. One, TV shot, the town that night, and then I'd done the week before I went to get directions from him, in Augusta. They were having matches, and Sergeant Slaughter was there, and he said, "Hey, great, good to see you." And he was genuinely happy to see me.
Right.
And they asked me, "Did you bring your gear with you?" And I said, "No, I just came to get directions. The guys are going to go to sightsee around Augusta and everything else." And he says, "We need you to work tonight." I says, "Okay." So I got trunks from Tito Santana,
Right.
boots from Tony Atlas, socks from somebody else. I went and worked.
Now, did you ever work for Leroy McGurk too for a little bit?
Yes. Late 80 to 82, prior to me going to New York, I was in Oklahoma for McGurk's.
What are your memories of working that little territory?
I loved
Tulsa,
it.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. Towards the end of McGurk's, before they went out of business, Jimmy Snuka came in, and Jimmy Snuka and we set that territory on fire. Literally set that place on fire. We were selling out places all over. And Jimmy, when I came to New York to wrestle for Vince McMahon Sr., the way Jimmy introduced me to Vince McMahon Sr. was, "This is the only man I know that could commit murder on the Capitol steps in Oklahoma City and get a medal pinned on him for it."
Huh.
And to this day, 30 years later, I am still very well known in that area, in Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas.
Let's talk more about the AWA. You mentioned a little bit about some guys that you worked with in the territory. I want to get your memories and thoughts on them. You mentioned already Nick Bockwinkel, who was pretty much your mentor. Memories of working with Red Bass Team. You said it was pretty much your first match.
Unbelievable. The man came by his nickname, the Man of 1,000 Holes, and it was all justified. The man was an absolute dictionary of the word wrestling.
How about the Crusher?
Crusher was unbelievable. Probably the most popular man in the AWA history was the Crusher. And I can remember when him and the Bruiser were a tag team.
All right.
And they were unbelievable then. And I found out some years later that the Crusher used to push my name. He told Wally Carbo and Vern Gagne, he says, "You need to take this kid and do something with him." And he would push my name and push me to the promoters, and he never said a word to me about it.
Now, at what point in the AWA did they have you with Wahoo as your mentor?
Actually, Wahoo wasn't a mentor. He came in, and at the time he was there for a short time, and he just kind of watched. It was kind of a watch thing. And Wahoo was a singles worker, not
Right.
much of a tag teamer, and I can understand his reasoning, to want to stay that way. He felt it was better for him to be a single.
What about Ken Batera? You got to work a little bit with Ken in AWA.
Ken is an unbelievable person. Strongest man ever to step through those ropes. Very easy to work with. A lot of fun.
Vern Gagne, as far as a promoter goes, what are your memories of Vern as a promoter?
The man knew the business. An excellent person.
Superstar Billy Graham? Memories of working with Superstar Billy Graham in AWA?
I only worked with Billy once or twice in AWA. Very easy, very good to work with. I learned from him. For a period of time there, it seemed like everybody that I worked with gave me advice, information, teaching. Like I said before, I consider myself to be probably one of the luckiest guys to ever get in this business with the mentors I had, the teachers I had. To me, I got $1 million worth of training from the AWA, and to this day, that's where home was.
Also in AWA, Ivan Putski was in the territory when you were there?
Yep, for a short time, yeah.
Memories of Ivan from AWA?
Good guy, easy to work with.
Larry Henning, Kurt Henning's father?
I'll tell you a story about Larry Henning. I went to do TV one time, and Larry told Wally Carbo, he says, if I'm not wrestling Frankie on TV, I'm going home.
Huh.
He said, I work with Frankie on TV or I don't work. He said, the kid knows what he's doing. He knows what I need. He knows how to do it for me. And that's the only one I'm going to work with.
Wow.
To me, that was one of the biggest compliments I ever got.
Yeah, it sounds like nobody was protecting their spots and everybody was working with each other.
Yeah.
Memories of the Iron Sheik from AWA days.
It's impossible for me to describe Khosrow Vaziri.
Huh.
To this day, I love being around Kaz because him and I will sit and we'll reminisce and we'll talk about the AWA days and we'll laugh and we'll laugh and we'll talk some more and then we'll laugh some more. He's just to me, he's a wonderful human being.
As far as working with Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell, you teamed up with, I think, Larry Henning a couple times to face those guys. What are your memories of facing Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell in the ring?
Quick. Both of them were quick.
Good workers, easy to work with?
Absolutely. A lot of fun. Enjoyable. More learning process.
Who did you travel with in the AWA?
Me?
Pretty much yourself?
Yeah.
Was it a tough schedule, the road schedule there?
Because of the way I worked, I wasn't in as rough a schedule as everybody else because I primarily worked on weekends.
Right.
It was like a part-time thing at that point. And I pretty much traveled by myself. And some of the guys who done TV from Milwaukee, I traveled with them. There was a kid by the name of Dick Reynolds who I traveled with, and another guy by the name of Vito Martino that I traveled with quite a bit. And these were guys that lived in and around Milwaukee that I worked out with and trained with and everything else.
Okay. Memories of Baron von Raschke?
an unbelievable persona. The man knew who he was, done what he needed to do, and done it to an excellence.
Good heel.
Absolutely.
Joe LeDuc, he was in the territory.
Strong guy. Smelled like garlic.
I've heard that before. Cowboy Bob Orton. Memories of Bob Orton.
I've only worked with Bobby probably 4 or 5 times throughout my entire career. Another guy I learned from. Even when I got to New York and worked with him there, I learned from him.
What are some of the things that Bob Orton taught you?
Psychology.
Psychology.
Yeah. Very, very good in the ring with what he did.
Bobby Heenan, probably one of the best talkers in the business. What are your thoughts on Bobby from AWA?
You just said it all. One of the best talkers in the business. Plus the fact that he could work too. Didn't hurt him at all.
A lot of people say he bumped like a wrestler and worked like a manager. I think that was the saying.
Yeah.
Any good rib stories from the AWA period of time?
No, I believe it or not, I don't remember any rib stories. Guys, for whatever reason, I don't think I was the target of many ribs.
Also, Ray Stevens, the crippler. What are your memories of Ray Stevens from AWA?
Second or equal to Nick Bockwinkel.
Great worker.
Unbelievable. Tell you a story about Ray Stevens. I was supposed to work with Ray Stevens in Madison Square Garden. I went to him and I said, Ray, I don't want to embarrass you because you're one of the people that taught me. What do you want me to do? He says, you know what to do. We're going to go out there and we're going to steal the show. The match following us was the world champion, Bob Backlund. After our match was over and Bob Backlund's match was over, Vince Sr. came and he says, you two guys will never go on in front of Bob Backlund again.
Huh. You could follow.
He couldn't.
Wow.
There are very few people, when Ray decided what he was going to do, could follow Ray Stevens. An unbelievable performer.
Peter Maivia, memories of Peter?
One of the greatest human beings ever to enter this business. As a performer, as a man, as a teacher. Unbelievable.
Out of your entire AWA run, what are some of your favorite matches that you had in AWA? What stand out the most?
The one match for me there's 2 matches that stand out for me. One was in Milwaukee Civic Center. It was the first time I ever won a match in a house show. The guy I beat in that house show would later become Ricky Steamboat. And the other match took place in Duluth, Minnesota. And this is probably kind of a rib thing that was pulled on me. I was working with Blackjack Lanza, who was another one of the guys that would occasionally lend words to help me get along and learn things. I pinned him in the middle of the ring in Duluth, Minnesota, and I went frickin' crazy. Nobody told me I was going to beat him. I didn't go back in the dressing room because I figured I was going to get an ass chewing because I'd done something wrong. I walked in and Greg Gagne says, how'd it go? And I says, I got a 1, 2, 3 on him. And he went, and Greg reached out his hand. He says, welcome to the club.
Right.
And from there I just went, it was like 10 tons of weight lifted off my shoulders. I says, what do you mean? He says, that's what was supposed to happen.
Wow.
So that was kind of the only rib that was ever pulled on me.
Right.
But in a way, it was done to help me learn.
From AWA, I believe you went over to Japan for a little bit too. Did you?
I spent 2 weeks in Japan with Wahoo as a tag team partner.
Right.
We went over there for 2 weeks for the tag team tournament.
For All Japan? For Baba or?
For Baba, yeah.
Okay.
Unbelievable time. I had spent 3 years in service in Tokyo, so it was like I'm going to someplace I know where I'm at. Only this time I was going in a different capacity, and we had an absolutely great time over there for 2 weeks.
Who were some of the guys that you worked over for All Japan? Do you remember? Or?
The Funks.
Wow.
Abdullah, the Butcher. The original Sheik. Mr. Wrestling was there, I believe. And then Bubba's crew. I can't even remember who was all on Bubba's crew.
What are your memories of Terry and Dory?
Terry is an absolute fun to be with person. To me, Terry was always the guy that if you were down a little bit, Terry, just being around Terry for 5 minutes would bring you right out of it. And Dory was serious. He knew the business. He knew what he was doing. And like everybody else, I tried to learn something from him. And Terry, you can say hello to Terry and learn something. Terry's just one of those guys.
What about Abdullah Butcher? What are your memories of Abby? A lot of people say he was selfish and not giving. Do you agree?
I don't know if I'd say he was selfish and not giving. He wanted to make sure that his place was secure, as did everybody else in this business. And to this day, the guys are still like that pretty much. The one thing I remember most about Abby was I got a scar about 3 inches long here on my forehead from working with him, and it was bloody.
Huh.
As any match with Abby at the time was just a bloodbath, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Memories of Sheik.
Same. It's fun. He's funny. He was funny, unbelievably funny.
Did you like working the Japanese style? Because it was a lot more stiff compared to the style in the States.
All Japan was more the state style than it was Japanese style. The other companies in Japan were a little bit stiffer.
You went over to Kansas City a little bit?
Yep, I spent about 6 months there.
You worked, I believe, with Bob Sweeten?
Yep.
Memories working with Bob?
Another learning process. He's easy to work. He was easy to work with, but at the same time, he was helping me learn. And I enjoyed it.
Who were some other guys in Kansas City that you worked with that you might not have met before earlier on in other territories?
Bulldog Bob Brown, Tom Andrews, Rufus Jones, a couple other guys I can't remember their names right now.
I think Terry Warndorf was there too, maybe?
Terry was
down the line
in Oklahoma with me.
Okay. I think that was in 81 too.
Yep.
Memories of working with David and Joel Deaton when you teamed up with Eric Emery.
Fun. A lot of fun. To me, those two guys, if you couldn't have fun working with those two guys, you need to go find another job. Very good workers. Very easy to work with.
You never went to Portland at all? Portland?
Yes, I did.
For Don Owens?
I was there for about 8 months.
What are your memories of working for Don Owens?
Trips were short. It was Don Owens and his brother Elton were very, very good men, very easy to work with. Very easy to work for. A lot of fun.
Who were some of the guys up there that you got to work with?
Who? Billy Jack Haynes was there. Guys, I can't even remember their names now.
Ray Oliver, was he there?
Yep. There was a couple of guys there that were really good.
Was Piper there?
No.
Okay, he came in after.
Kurt Hennig was there.
Young Kurt Hennig?
Yep. The Cuban Assassin
Right.
was there. A lot of good workers. A lot of very good workers.
You never did Memphis, right?
No.
Okay. So, what other territories did you work before heading to New York?
Los Angeles. I worked for Mike in Los Angeles.
McGurk?
No, not Mike McGurk. Mike
LaBelle?
LaBelle.
Okay.
Yeah. Very easy territory to work in.
What year is that around?
That was the end of 79 into 80.
So, like maybe Pepper Gomez and those guys were down there? Or?
Yeah, the Great Goliath. Ox Baker was there. Alberto Madril.
Right.
Al Madril. The Guerreros.
So, you pretty much worked all the entire territorial system in the States before going to New York?
Yep. Coast to coast and border to border.
Wow. So, you never went up to Canada first?
No, I was supposed to go to Vancouver, and Vernon Wally told me I don't need to go up there. It was something to do with their business. And,
political.
Yeah, and they told me not to go. So since they were kind of like my mentors and bringing me into the business, I listened to them.
You ever worked Florida?
Yes, I wrestled out of Pensacola. I was down there for about 6 to 8 weeks. At the time I was down there, the money was not that great.
Would that be for the Fullers or?
It was right after the Fullers. The Fullers left, and a new group come in and took over, and I went down there for them. I became their TV champion my first night in the business, my first night down there. Beat Archie Goldie for the TV title, the Stomper.
Right. How did you wind up in New York?
I was working out of Los Angeles. New Year's Day, I get a phone call from Mike LaBelle. He said, write this phone number down. When you hang up talking to me, you call this number. I said, who am I calling? He said, Vince McMahon Sr. I went, okay. I hung up talking to Mike. I redialed the phone. Vince McMahon Sr. was like sitting there waiting. Picked up the phone. And I said, Mr. McMahon, I said, Mike LaBelle told me to give you a call right away. He says, yes. He says, you're coming to New York. If you want to. I said, everybody wants to go to New York. And he goes, don't misunderstand me. It's not going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month. He said, it's going to be a little while. He said, but from now on until you come to this territory, I want to know where you are. I want to know that you're being taken care of, that you're making enough money to earn a living on and everything else. He said, when I get ready, he says, I need you to come. I went, yes, sir. He said, about every 6 weeks or so, I want a phone call from you. So from there, for the next 2 years, I called him about every 6 weeks to let him know how I was doing, where I was.
Oh, wow. It was a 2-year window.
Yep.
Wow. Did you think at any point in time that it wasn't going to happen and you were just blowing smoke, or did you know you were going to go in still?
I, like everybody else in a situation like that, you have reservations. And I kept hoping it would happen, and I kept being reassured that it was going to happen. And every time I talked to Vince Sr., it was, you're coming, you know.
What are your memories of your debut? How did it come about?
It was on TV. Jay brought me out as the little brother. And
did you know Jay prior to this at all?
no. And the crowd went absolutely nuts in the Allentown Fairgrounds at the TV, and I was flabbergasted. You know, I'd been doing TV for probably a good 9 weeks, and when I walked through that curtain to go to the ring that day, it was the most unbelievable thing that ever happened to me in my life, in my career. The crowd just went crazy, you know, and I went, whoa.
What year is this around? 82, 81?
This is 82.
82?
Yep. March of it, 1982.
What was the initial angle that they did with you and Jay together? Was it that?
No, it was against...
Fuji Saito?
No, it was against... Keith Franks. And I forget who his tag team partner was at the time. Then it turned into Fuji and Saito shortly thereafter.
That was pretty much your first big program in WWF. Was
Yep.
Fuji and Saito. You guys were pretty much paired together, and you worked all across the states for WWF at the time. What were your memories of working with Fuji and Saito?
Constant. It was a constant thing. Always working. Always working.
Were they giving as far as your matches?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Fuji was known for being a huge ribber. Obviously, you've heard the same stories that I've heard. You have any memories of some of the ribs that he's pulled besides the dog food one?
Everybody knows about the dog food one.
Yeah.
The only other rib that I really remember him doing was one of the boys asked him to take his car down to get an oil change. Guy was going to be gone for 2 or 3 days. Asked Fuji to take the car down and get the oil change. The guy came back. He went to pay the bill, and the bill was $1,200. While he was gone, Fuji, not only did he get the oil change, from what I understand, he got 4 brand new tires. He got a major tune-up. He got a new battery. The transmission was all tuned up. New exhaust system. Everything. And the guy figured he was, $20 for an oil change in 1982, and he gets a $1,200 bill.
Did he pay it?
Yep.
Did Fuji pay him back, or?
I don't know.
Wow. So I believe it was June 28th, 1982. You guys defeated Fuji and Saito for the
first time.
Yep, for WWF Tag Team titles. Memories of that match?
Unbelievable. It happened in Madison Square Garden, and to walk out into Madison Square Garden for somebody new who's never been in that territory, to walk into Madison Square Garden and there's 27,500 people, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But Jay said, "What'd you see out there?" And I said, "That's a big building." He said, "That's right. It's just another building. It's just another wrestling arena. Don't let it get you." And we had good matches with him.
Now, the crowd heat back then was amazing. I mean, the fans pretty much bought everything. What was it like for you to go out there and perform in front of the fans that were so rabid?
Scary at first. There was more fear. There was more frightening to me getting from the dressing room to the ring than it was getting in the ring and working. Because Jay had told me a story one time where he walked out, and as he walked through the gate, his headdress disappeared, and he watched it go through the crowd and people taking feathers off of his headdress.
Huh.
And that can be a little disconcerting, when you haven't even gotten to the ring and all of a sudden your gear is starting to take a hike on you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I believe you lost the belts back to them, I believe, a month later, July 13th.
Yep.
Why was it so quick?
It wasn't that we lost the belts back to them. They were held up for some reason. There was a complaint lodged or something, as part of it. And
right.
What it did is it prolonged our stay and it prolonged my stay in WWF.
I believe like 2 months later they gave you the belts again, October 26th.
Yep.
For the second time. So, and then the Samoans came into the territory. Now with the Samoans and Fuji and Saito, did you see any of the guys like fighting over their spots, or did pretty much everybody get along?
Everybody got along. As far as I could tell, everybody was getting along.
What are your memories of working with Afa and Sika?
A lot of fun.
Easy to work?
Very, very definitely some of the best matches I've had were with those two guys.
What was the typical weekly schedule for you guys back then in the early 80s? You did TV on Saturday in Allentown, and as far as house shows go?
We done TV on Tuesday and Wednesday in Allentown and Hamburg.
Right.
And some weeks we were working 8 times. Some weeks we were working 6 times. We were pretty much constant. At the time, WWF was really cooking. And we were part of it. So, to use an old phrase, you strike while the iron is hot, So we were working quite a bit, In 360 days, we were probably working 250 or maybe even 300 days.
Right. During the 80s, obviously, we talked to a lot of the guys. Was there a big drug scene back in the 80s, the early 80s?
There was...
Besides steroids and stuff, being on the road.
I didn't see it.
Right.
There may have been, but I didn't see it.
Right. Let's talk about some other talent that you shared the locker room with. The talent pool was incredible during the 80s, especially in WWF. You had guys like Tony Gray. I'm just going to mention some guys, and you could mention what your thoughts on them are. Tony Gray, memories of Tony?
A lot of fun. Good guy.
Then Ivan Putski was back in the mix.
Yep.
Rick Martel?
Rick was not there when I was there. He came in sort of towards the end. Good worker. Very good performer.
Was the Valiants there when you were there?
They came in towards the end of our run there.
Okay.
And they were there before us, really. And then they came back for a little while.
Was Atlas and Johnson there when you were there?
They came in after us.
After you guys?
But I knew both of them.
Okay. Because I know they beat the Samoans for the belts eventually. So that's right before Hogan came in. Memories of the Moondogs. I think it was Rexon's spot.
Funny. Good performers, though.
Bob Backlund, he was the top guy. He was the champion of WWF in the early 80s. You also got to work him, I believe, in 77 in AWA.
Yep.
What are your memories of Bob Backlund?
Very much business-like.
What was he like outside the ring?
Quiet, very, very kind of almost studious.
Did the boys like him?
I liked him. I still like him to this day.
Sergeant Slaughter?
One of the nicest people I've ever met.
Fred Blassie?
Fred Blassie belongs in a class by himself. And as far as this business is concerned, if you say wrestler, you could put Fred Blassie in there. You say manager, you could put Fred Blassie in there. Guy had an unbelievable way with a microphone.
You put him in the same class as Bobby Heenan, or better because he could work?
Probably about the same.
George the Animal Steel. Memories of George.
Unbelievable. George to me, George Steele was one of those people that, he knew where he was. George is no dummy. And if you look at his history, he's been a school teacher, a coach. He knew what the business was, and he knew how to handle himself in the business.
Memories of Jesse Ventura from back in the 80s.
Not only the 80s, but the 70s. The guy's intelligent. Easy to work with.
Some people we talked to said Jesse was kind of scared to get in the ring with certain guys, and he was always scared of getting hurt. Did you ever experience that?
Not with Jesse.
Okay.
I think everybody who gets into business has a fear of getting hurt, working with some people and some people not.
Right.
Even I, had trepidations about working with some guys because I didn't know them, and after I worked with them, it became easy. Samoans were probably the scariest to me to not have worked with them and then get in the ring and work with them, and then you learn what the business is about.
Right. Bruno Sammartino. Memories of Bruno.
I never worked with Bruno. I met him. I know him. Not very well, but I know him.
Right.
A class gentleman.
Now, you have to have some good Andre the Giant stories.
I tell people Andre the Giant is the only man I beat continuously. And they look at me like I'm some kind of weirdo. But I did. I beat him constantly.
Chess?
Cribbage.
Yes, that's the game you used to play.
Cribbage. I used to beat him, and he'd beat me. But you get a rise out of people and you say, I used to beat Andre all the time. Not in the ring. But on a cribbage board, yeah.
Huh. What was he like backstage?
Andre, to me, was an absolute gentleman. I got along with Andre very, very well. Extremely well. He came to Portland when I was wrestling out of Portland. And I got in the dressing room, and he was already in the dressing room, and he was sitting on the end of the bench, and he had the cribbage board and the cards there, and he goes, that's all he did. I knew, we're going to play cribbage.
Right.
And then he asked me if he could ride with me while he was out there, and I absolutely.
Big drinker, obviously, from the stories that we hear.
Yeah, Andre could put him away.
Now, you had some awesome six-man matches. I actually was there for one of my first shows ever. It was you and Jay and Andre against Blackjack Mulligan and the Samoans. What are your memories of some of those matches?
A lot of them were funny.
Right.
A lot of them were really funny. But they were good. A lot of good matches.
Memories of Blackjack Mulligan.
Big. I knew him when he was Big Bad Bobby Windham out of AWA,
Right.
where he trained. Easy to work with.
Angelo Mosca.
Another huge football player. He could be a little stiff, but if it was for a reason. Usually a TV camera was present.
Pedro Morales.
One of the friendliest guys I know.
Iron Mike Sharp.
One of the cleanest guys I know.
Everyone thought, yeah, he had a compulsive disorder, right, about that? He would wash his hands 1,000 times or something?
He would wash 1,000 times. He was the only guy I know of could use up 2 or 3 bars of soap taking one shower.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Anybody ever rib him? Get him dirty? And it's weird to be in the wrestling business and
I would imagine, I didn't see it, myself, but I would imagine there were people who would play games with him.
Any locker room fights? Have you ever witnessed any?
No.
No. Johnny Rods. Memories of Johnny.
I like Johnny. I love to work with him. Johnny, to me, was one of the most underrated performers in the business.
He also went on to become a good trainer. He trains
Yes.
a lot of the guys in WRC, please.
He's, to my opinion, very highly underrated. And I think if he'd been given a push, he could have been super.
Swede Hansen.
I love Swede Hansen. Him and I were in Oklahoma together. People used to say Swede Hansen had a heavy hand with his chops. And we were in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I said, I'm going to find out just how hard this man can hit. So him and I got in a chopping thing outside the ring after a battle royal. And the man is huge. I mean, the man could chop you and hurt you. And after about the third or fourth chop, I said, great. Now I know I'm satisfied. Everything that people have said about him is true to some extent. Yeah, he can chop you. It feels like an axe whacking you. But at the same time, he would never try to hurt you.
Memories of Big John Studd.
One memory I have, John Studd was doing the You Can't Slam Me thing. And we were in Doha, Qatar. Or it might have been Dubai. And he says, go for the slam. And when he said slam, I had him off his feet. He said, don't slam me, please, my back. And I went to my knees to get out of it.
What was he like outside the ring?
Very easy to get along with. I thought he was very nice.
Ivan Koloff?
An absolute dream. Him and I had, and these are Vince McMahon's words, Senior's words. I wrestled Ivan in Madison Square Garden, my last night there, June 21st, 1983. We got finished with the match. I went back to the dressing room. Vince Sr. come to the door and he goes, Frankie, I need to talk to you. So I walked out and him and Vince Jr. were both standing out there. Vince Sr. said to me, Frankie, that was one of the finest matches I have seen in 40 years of promoting wrestling in this building. You and Ivan Koloff tore this place apart.
I'm going to ask you why you left the company a little bit. Coming up, some other guys I want to talk to you about. Lou Albano.
Absolute fun. Lou was an unbelievable person in this business. He's one of those people that
Larger than life.
Yes. Larger than life.
Do you remember the times at TVs where he'd get all drunk and get fired and then get rehired a couple weeks later?
I only seen it happen once, and it was the next day he got rehired.
Pat Patterson, members of Pat?
Pat was one of my original teachers along with Ray and Nick Bockwinkel.
Good guy?
Yes.
Probably
very intelligent. Extremely intelligent.
Yeah, a lot of people consider him probably one of the best Finnish guys in the business.
Yes. I'll go along with that.
What was Vince Sr. like to work for?
To say anything about Vince Sr. is not saying enough. The man was an absolute gentleman, an unbelievable businessman. He knew his business. He was a gentleman all the time. And I don't think there's anybody that didn't like him. If there is, I don't know who it would be, because I thought he was an absolute dream. You know, if everybody had a boss like Vince Sr., the whole world would be better off.
What are your memories of Vince Jr.?
Very businesslike, very, very good.
He was doing announcing back then, right?
Yeah, very good man with a microphone. And if you watch him today, you can tell it.
Did you see the potential in him at an early on age that he was going to be something in the business when his dad passed?
I knew he was going to go somewhere.
Right.
You know, deep in my own mind, I knew he was going to do what he needed to do, and do what he wanted to do, because he was just that good.
Memories of Greg Valentine?
Quiet. Greg was quiet. You know, and I've traveled a little bit with Greg and had a lot of fun. We just carry on conversations.
Billy Graham? Superstar Billy Graham again in WWF?
I only worked with Billy a couple times in the AWA. I don't remember working with him in WWF, but he was a good man for WWF.
And then, of course, Don Muraco.
Don is one of those guys you just like to be around. He's a lot of fun. He's very intelligent, you know. And most of the guys in our business are all above average intelligence. I mean, our people, the people in our business, had to be some of the most intelligent human beings walking this planet. And I consider myself lucky to be part of it. You know, always have and always will be.
Memories of Jimmy Snuka in WWF. I guess when you guys were there, he was a heel, and then he eventually turned babyface with Buddy Rogers.
Yeah. Jimmy and I go back to the AWA. When I first met Jimmy, his name was Lonnie Kealoha in AWA. And we became good friends, played a lot of cribbage. I worked with Jimmy in Oklahoma. And as I said before, we set that place on fire. I mean, we had that place rocking. Jimmy is Jimmy. That's all I can say.
Were you still in the company when the incident happened in '83 with the girl?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the entire situation?
I was there that night. I was at the hotel the night everything went down, and that's all I know is what we were told.
You think it was just an accident that she bumped her head, or you think there was a cover up, or?
To me, I believe it was an accident.
How did Jimmy handle that whole incident?
Not very well.
Let's talk more about Vince Jr. when he took over the company. Were you there for the actual initial transition from senior to junior, or were you already gone?
I was already gone. I left there in June, and I was working in Portland when I got the word that Vince Sr. had passed away. And I, like a lot of other people in this business, took it kind of hard because the man had been so good to me. And it just rocked me. You know, that he was an unbelievable boss, an unbelievable man to work for. Pure class.
So you were pretty much already gone before Vince Jr. took over and
Right.
They brought in Hogan and all.
Yeah.
So you didn't see the Hogan takeover, basically. You already.
I was already gone.
Okay. What led you to leave the company?
When I went in, and Vince Sr. said, "We're going to do this run. You'll be here about a year. You're going to go out for about 4 to 6 months, and then you're coming back as a single. And then we're going to go from there." In the meantime, Vince Sr. died. Everything changed. Junior took over. So and then I 84, I met Junior at, went and worked a convention for him, the NAFTA convention in San Francisco.
Right.
And at the time, he said, we're going to try and get you back in here as quick as we can. And it never materialized. I don't, for whatever reason, I didn't go back.
Right. What was the, I guess, the fame like in the WWF in the 80s? Here you were, you worked the smaller territories, but, WWF had TV all over the country. And, you were now a name and a household name pretty much. One of the top baby faces in the company. How did you handle fame? What was it like being on the road, going through airports and all of that stuff?
Fame will get you for a while. And then the fame becomes a chore. You can't go shopping. You can't go to the grocery store. I stopped at a Kmart in Dover, Delaware to pick up some tape, athletic tape. I barely made it through the door, and there must have been a crowd of 300 people were there within minutes. And all they wanted to do was touch you, shake your hand, say hi, whatever. Fame is a job. How you handle it, you gotta not let it overwhelm you, and you have to learn to keep it in control.
After the WWF, where did you end up at? I know you did a lot of indies.
Went to Portland, Oregon. Was there, then I came back, went to the Middle East for WWF. Came back from that, went to Texas.
I'm going to ask you about Texas then. Fritz von Erich. This is around, I believe, maybe 84.
Yep.
What was it like working for Fritz?
Different.
Why is that?
It wasn't that it was hard. There was, you're working 3 or 4 days a week and, 2 or 3 days off. But as everybody knows, everything was centered around the boys.
If you're a baby face, it was hard to get yourself over.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the boys, David and Curry and Kevin. Obviously, we've done interviews with hundreds of guys, and they've talked about their crazy lifestyles. Did you witness the crazy behavior of the Von Erichs?
Everybody gets crazy at some point or another, to some extent. Theirs was just made more public, I think, than anybody else's.
You got to work with the missing link down there?
Yes.
Memories of Dewey?
A lot of fun to work with. I taught him how to roar.
Right.
Taught Michael Hayes how to do the moonwalk. Buddy Roberts. Easy to work with.
Terry
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
Memories of working with those guys, the Freebirds?
Easy to work with. A lot of fun to work with. Once you get into the groove of working with them, you could have a ball.
Who was the workhorse of the group? Was it Terry or Buddy?
Buddy.
Buddy
And Terry. Mike was the mouth.
Right. John Tatum? Memories of Hollywood John Tatum?
Good kid.
The Irwin brothers? Bill?
Unbelievable. They're Minneapolis boys.
Right.
They came out of the same place I did. Their work ethic, and their style was pure Minneapolis.
Gino Hernandez? What are your memories of Gino?
Cute boy. All the girls liked him. And a good worker.
Did you, I obviously heard about his untimely passing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see it coming or?
No.
How long were you in the Texas territory for?
About 4 to 6 months.
Oh, okay. Right. You also worked some indies up in Pennsylvania, I believe, NWF?
Yep. NWF, IWA.
Memories of doing some of the shows with DC Drake. And I think Bruiser Brody was your tag team partner.
Yep.
You worked with DC and Damian Kane.
We could set a crowd on fire.
What are your memories of Bruiser Brody?
a gentleman, a good person, and a good worker. He knew what he had to do, and he done it.
Did you know him from before?
No.
Oh, it was the first time you ever met him?
Yep.
Oh, wow. So you didn't get a chance to be around him that long?
No, I sure didn't. And I think if I'd got a chance to be around him, I could have learned even more. Everybody I worked with, I tried to learn something from him, and take little bits of advice and teaching and whatever I could to make myself better. It was just my way of making sure that the business was going to be there.
A lot of people say that, you were always one of the boys, and Jay obviously became a road agent and stuff like that. Did you always see it like that? As far as, we hear different stories from guys that say that you and Jay might have had a little heat sometimes. Like, Jay would say that you would go into the bar and drink, and he would pretty much try to be all business, and that you would ruin things for him. Do you think that's true, or?
I would go to the bars and socialize with the guys.
You'd be more of a socializer, and Jay was pretty much business and office.
And most of the time I was drinking Coke.
So was there ever tension between you and Jay, obviously, or?
I didn't think so. Apparently he thought so.
Did you guys get along? At the end of your run?
Yeah.
Let's see what else I have. Do you still follow the business today?
Not as much as I used to, but I still follow it.
What do you think is wrong with today's wrestling?
I'm not making any money. I don't think there's really anything wrong with it. I think it evolved a long, long time ago. Two men told me, go outside the building and look at what it says on the marquee. It says pro wrestling. Emphasis on the wrestling. When promoters have done everything they can think of and done everything anybody around them can think of, it will always come back to wrestling. It's the root for everything in our business. And it'll evolve, it'll change, it'll grow. I was once told by a very, very smart man, in fact a couple of them, Nick Bockwinkel being one of them, Pat O'Connor being another one, that this business runs in cycles. There'll be up years and down years and up years, and wrestling will lose interest, and then it'll gain it back, and it'll lose interest and gain it back. And with the evolving, I think it's maintained for the last 25 years. Its place in sports or in entertainment, whatever you want to call it.
You mentioned some old timers. I forgot to ask you about Buddy Rogers. What do you remember about Buddy Rogers?
The guy was different. He was a world champion, and he maintained that, and rightly so. The guy could absolutely perform at a champion's level.
If you were to take just pick two matches that you were most proud of that you would want to show your grandkids, what matches would they be that you have had?
The last one against the Samoans when we lost the belts. The one with Ivan Koloff in Madison Square Garden. The one with Ray Stevens in Madison Square Garden. And probably the one with Ricky Steamboat when he was Richard Blood in Milwaukee.
When you and Jay would tag up and work guys, who would pretty much call the match? Would it be you or Jay?
Jay.
Who would take most of the heat?
Me.
Yeah. He'd be the hot tag?
He'd get I'd give him the hot tag.
Right.
Like he said, you do the work, I'll get the glory.
Were you all for that?
Didn't bother me a bit.
As long as you're getting paid?
Long as I was having fun and getting paid, it didn't bother me.
Do you follow MMA at all? UFC?
No.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you thought it hurt the business.
I'm still kind of up in the air about that whole MMA thing. You know, it's to me, it's totally different. I think the possibility for some really bad injuries could take place. But I don't know. I don't follow it that close. You know, I'll watch it every once in a while just for something else to do.
Right. Would you ever want to write a book?
I've been told for the last 10 years that I need to sit down and write a book. And my answer to that is it would have to be put in the fiction aisle or the humor aisle, because the only thing I can remember would be the funny stuff, the good stuff. You know, some of the stuff that I could write would be totally unbelievable.
Out of all the wrestling deaths, which have hit you the hardest?
Andre, because him and I used to play cribbage so much, and we were good friends. Andre and I are the same age, and that kind of struck me really hard. Peter Maivia's death, because he was just a class person, and it has to do with the culture. You know, me being Native American, him being Polynesian, there are some similarities between our two cultures, and that bothered me.
Do you think the Strongbow should be in the WWE Hall of Fame?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I should be in the Hall of Fame. Jay should be in the Hall of Fame. We were world champions on 2 occasions, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be.
Who are some other guys that you like to watch perform in the ring?
From my early years, from 1970 to 1979, anybody from the AWA, Pat O'Connor, Terry and Dory Funk, there's a guy, his name is Al Madrill, who was junior heavyweight champion at one time, who's an absolute dream to watch work. The Samoans are I love to watch them work.
Did you ever work Puerto Rico?
I was in Puerto Rico for 3 matches.
For Victor Jovica and Carlos's company?
Yep.
What are your memories of working down there?
It's hot.
Right.
It was very hot because I went down in August.
Where did you work, Bayman and all them?
Yeah.
What are your memories of that little territory with the fans?
Those fans are something else. They really get into it. You know, those people down there are real diehard fans.
Looking back, do you have any regrets?
Yeah, the only regret I have is I didn't start sooner. When I decided to go on the road in 1979 and go at it full time, I had one goal, was to wrestle in every major wrestling arena in the country. And at that point, I would have been satisfied. To become a world's champion, either tag team world champion or a singles world champion for some of the small independent groups, was beyond my dreams. My dream was to wrestle in every major wrestling arena in the country, and I succeeded in doing that.
Oh, go ahead.
You know, from the Cow Palace to Madison Square Garden to the Sportatorium in Dallas, Milwaukee Civic Center, Minneapolis Civic Center, Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, you know, the Spectrum in Philadelphia, Landover in Maryland. You know, I sat down with somebody one time and we were talking about it, and they said, you know, there's on an average year there, at that time there was probably 20,000 wrestlers in the business. Maybe 200 will get to go to New York in a career. I was one of those guys that got to go to, started in the AWA, went to the NWA, went to the WWF, you know, and I consider myself, number one, very lucky that I was able to do it. Apparently, you know, guys throughout the business, throughout my career, thought that I was talented enough to get me, you know, put me in positions where I was able to do that thing. And it was everybody's dream and only a few people's reality. I'm one of the lucky ones that it became a reality.
Did you ever work any territories with Dusty and Flair?
Minneapolis.
Flair?
Yes.
When he first started?
Yeah, when he had brown hair and was chubby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ran into Ric Flair in Washington, D.C. And he was the NWA World Champion at the time. And I was sitting in the dressing room talking to Ivan Koloff. And he walked in with Lex Luger right behind him. And Rick goes, "Hey, Indian, you learned how to work yet?" I went, "No, have you?"
Huh.
And Luger's mouth fell open, you know, like, who the hell are you to be talking to Ric Flair like that? And he come and grabbed me and hugged me.
Oh,
no,
okay,
Ric
right.
Flair did. And it was, you know, one of those things that some people only experience in their dreams. To have a world champion talk to me like I was his equal, to me was the reality of a dream. And I wrestled Rick in Dallas, Texas, at the big building. I don't know, they call it the Hemisphere or something like that. And we had 18,000 people screaming for about 14 minutes. And for the first 5 minutes, all we did was stand nose to nose. And we had 18,000 people screaming. You know, that's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of heat he had. Probably still got it too.
That was awesome. In closing, is there anything you want to say to your fans out there that you never had a chance to say to before?
Thanks. Thanks for allowing me the absolute pleasure of performing for you.
Thanks for being here today. And you know what? Before we hang, what do you do today?
Right now, I work for the largest retail company in the world, and I live on my own reservation in Wisconsin. And I work with a part of our health clinic there. Some years ago, I developed type 2 diabetes, and we've got a diabetes program in Green Bay right now on the Oneida Reservation, and it's called Triad, Taking Responsibility and Addressing Diabetes. And me and a Native American comedian named Charlie Hill, have kind of become the poster boys for, you know, addressing the diabetes situation. And I'm working with them to bring information, awareness, and the fact that you can live with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and do, you know, have a pretty normal life at it, you know. And it's something that I find fulfilling. I'm helping my people, doing what I was told by some elders quite some time ago that would happen. And enjoying it.
Well, once again, we want to thank you for being here today, and we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you. My pleasure. Glad to do it.
Thank you very much.